It is now time to experience the buzz, a podcast that takes an inside look at amazing people doing amazing things. Get ready for some great conversation that will be fascinating, educational, and inspiring. We will also leave room to help small businesses in a big way. Now, here's your host, entrepreneur Steve Buzzard.
Welcome in, everyone. Another episode of Experience the Buzz. I am so glad you decided to join me for another great conversation. This one is with Clive Savacool. Found out he is a resident of Sacramento. He is a former firefighter who has developed an app within his work as a firefighter. It is called LogRx, and it is built for organizations like paramedics, fire stations, and Clive will actually reveal to us those were the original two, but it's branched out into some other things. But we'll have more on Clive in just a moment. Let's go ahead and get to What's the Buzz. I am so very excited because today is the debut of Heavy Metal Thunder. So here's what's going to happen. Much like what we did with the Banter Bros, it will be the third and final segment. So if you are a heavy metal enthusiast, we've got our debut, which today is going to be Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast. That was the very first metal album that I purchased way back in 1984 as an 8th grader at St. John Vianney. So again, check that out. We're just throwing it out there. I even give the album a rating. Big fan of Bruce Dickinson, lead vocalist. Oh man, I could go on and on, but good stuff. You can check that out in our third segment. The first two, of course, will be with our guest, Clive Savacool, and that is What's the Buzz. Now, let's get to it. Clive Savacool, again, episode number 95. Very great conversation. I open up by telling Clive that he should think about doing something else in his career. You will tell by his voice. He's got some really good baritone voice coming at you. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right to it. This is The Talking Story featuring Clive Savacool right here on Experience the Buzz. Hello, everyone. It is Steve Buzzard, and it is Experience the Buzz, and we are so excited to bring on our guest for today. It is Clive Savacool. That's right. He used to be a fire chief, but really what we're talking about today is an app that he was able to launch because of his work as a fireman and a fire chief, and that is the LogRx app. We're going to get into it. It's pretty fascinating. First and foremost, Clive, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Steve. This has been great. It's just to be able to be part of your show.
Yeah, very good. So I told you kind of jokingly, like, you know, when I heard your voice, because you had done some other podcasts in my research and stuff, I said, this guy needs to be doing voiceover, but it sounds like you're doing pretty good with the app. But, you know, keep that voiceover as kind of something on the back burner, because I think you got something there.
Thank you. That'll be my fallback.
And you had said what your grandfather had done some commercial work.
That's right. He actually did voiceover for doing Cadillac commercials, which was never his intention. He loved Cadillacs, went in and bought one without even driving it. Said, I want the new model. And they said, that's great. Can you do our commercials? So he ended up, as a little kid, hearing my grandpa on the radio doing Cadillac commercials. He was an old New Yorker from Brooklyn, too. So he had that accent going along with the deep voice.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Well, yeah, you've got those deep baritones, and those are always unique voices to hear. Like, you know, having been in radio and everything, I always look for people who have just that voice where you can say, yeah, I could see them definitely doing something like voiceovers. But let's talk about LogRx app. I mean, I'll let you just kind of give us a story on how this all came about. It's pretty fascinating.
Sure. I've been a paramedic since the late 90s. I've worked in Contra Costa County most of my career as a paramedic and then as a firefighter, promoting up through the ranks. And everywhere I worked as a paramedic, everyone tracked their narcotics on pen and paper because paramedics carry narcotics, mostly for like pain relief or sedatives. And throughout the years, I was able to see just some what they call diversion, which is where a drug gets lost or stolen. And when they do pen and paper, which is how it's tracked, it's, you know, the DEA comes in, the law enforcement comes in and investigate, like, I mean, this is a mess. And most agencies did that. And I had another startup called Exposure Tracker that I started in 2014 that ended up getting acquired in 2018, I think it was. And while I was visiting agencies, fire departments for that, it was a health and safety software program for fire departments. And a lot of them would ask me, some chiefs say, hey, have you seen anything out there for tracking narcotics? Because we're coming up with nothing. This paper just does not work. And it's, the 2000s, 2018, whatever it was. And they're like, everyone's got an app, but there's nothing for tracking narcotics. And so I started LogRx in 2016, just as sort of like a pet project with a couple of developers. They ended up moving on good terms. And I recruited a buddy that was a CEO of Tablet Command, another software startup. Is doing quite well. And so he came over to work with me on LogRx. And that's when we really hit the ground running. We got a new developer, and we kind of launched in 2019. And really it was this new solution for agencies that were using pen and paper. Now they had an app. And so they didn't have to buy any hardware. They could use their existing smart devices. And we took basically as technology advanced with smartphones and tablets, we took advantage of that. So tracking GPS, geolocating with fingerprint and face ID and all these other components that the phones already had in them. So we were able to offer these features to agencies without them having to buy anything. And so it's just been really a great journey.
That's great. Yeah. And it's going well for you. And we're going to get into where you are now with it. It's done very well, but just the thought that all this was done with pen and paper. I mean, that's got to blow you away because like you said, you have some background in developing, you had done so before, but here we are in 2022. You're talking just a few years ago that you were able to launch this. It probably just blew you away that it took so long to get to something, and you're still trying to get the word out there. I know it's still progressing.
Yeah, and it's funny when I tell people that aren't in the industry on how pen and paper is being used, and they're like, that's ridiculous. Why would they do that? Like a caveman could have been inscribing that on a wall, thousands of years ago, and people are still just using pen and paper tracking narcotics. And so, yeah, telling people that aren't in the industry are shocked, and then people in the industry are kind of glad that there's a solution out there, because we do have just a handful of competitors, but they're all just kind of like a side idea just to bring in customers to upsell them to their other big projects. And we're just like tracking narcotics. That's our main thing. And we figure, let's do this one thing right, and then we can grow.
The logistics of putting an app together, that in itself, right? This is like a big thing for many years now of people trying to design apps. I would imagine so many intricacies. I feel like the average Joe here. So that's why I've got you on the show, because not only do I want you to talk about the app, but what goes into it? What is the process that you could kind of give us, I guess, in layman's terms, that so someone like me would understand? What goes into it?
Yeah, and great question. I'll preface it with saying I'm not a developer. I'm not an engineer. I know nothing about coding. A year ago today, when I was managing the Caldor fire, I had a flip phone. And so I still had a smartphone so that I could test and run my software company, but I just like a flip phone. And so I'm not, I can barely work a speak and spell for people old enough to remember those. Yeah, so basically I was being in the industry a couple decades, I designed what I thought would be a nice flow path and how to work an app and make it easy. Because one of the things we joke about in the industry is making something firefighter proof. There's no joke that if you put a firefighter in a locked room with 2 ball bearings and then open the door, one will be missing, the other one's broken, and he's not going to tell it. He's not having any idea what happened.
I love it.
So we wanted to build something firefighter proof. So the app itself has just 2 buttons so that they can follow the path, whatever they want, it'll tell them. And so I was kind of the brainchild on developing how it should work. The developers would say, actually, before you go to the developers, you hire someone who does what they call UI UX design, which is user interface and user experience. And those are the smart people that go through and say, here's how the graphics should look. Here's how a flow path of how what you want will be the best user experience. And so they're not going to take the phone and chuck it because they're mad because your app isn't working. They're really going to enjoy using it. Yeah. And back, I think it was Virgin Airlines had a really good design on their website that I gave a developer. Said, hey, I really love the flow path on this. Can we make something that goes along those lines? And so then once the designer finishes up their UI UX side, the user experience, it then goes to the developers. At the time I had 2. Now we have one main developer. He's in Utah, and he then builds it out. And as he's building it, we have what's called a sandbox. And that's not the part that's live that the people in the field get to use. That's the side that those of us in the company is a small start. There's only like 6 of us. We'll go through and test it. So like today we released a notifications feature. And so I'll go through and I'll test it and I'll try and break it. And coding is frustrating where sometimes they'll deploy a feature to do notifications, but then all of a sudden it changes something else you never would have dreamed of in the app. So testing that feature also includes testing everything else in the app. So it's kind of arduous, but that's to make sure that once you deploy it to your customers, they're not the ones that find the bug and call you at 2 a.m. So that's really how the designing and all the app really works from kind of a layman's terms. That's the best I know of it.
No, I think that was well done because it made me think of, like, for me, putting together my website. You know, I had to create a vision who then someone who was an expertise in that space could then put together. And so I'm thinking along those lines because the ultimate thing is you want everything to be streamlined. And that's interesting. You say firefighter proof because really that's how things really need to be for people, because I think it's amazing. Like when I get questions, instead of getting like, I guess, upset with that person, say, well, why couldn't you figure it out? Like in my brain, I'm not telling them, you know, this in person, but then it speaks to you like, okay, what did I do wrong in the process that made them ask that question? So I imagine it's a similar thing that you want to make sure that, yeah, when you launch, there aren't going to be any questions, because when you put out an app, I think that's a little bit different, right? Because the app is there, and then, you know, being able to fix the bugs, it might be a little different in your pathway.
It is, and it's software. Inevitably, there are going to be bugs that sneak by. And so one of the things we focused on is, and I was telling the story to a buddy the other day, and he said, oh, that's the Jerry Maguire option where you have fewer customers with more attention. He said, oh, yeah, that was the basis of his whole letter he wrote that got him fired. I said, oh, well, that's what we're doing. So we took on.
I like that.
It's good. It really gave us the ability, partly because we all had other jobs, and I wasn't ready to quit my fire chief job at the time. And so we had the ability to kind of go at a slower pace in development. So we just took on a handful of customers, and we said, all right, let's just kill them with kindness. So when the bugs do come up, and they're going to, we're going to give them so much attention that they are a better customer after having that issue than before having that problem. And I don't want to claim that's my idea either. I took that from the JetBlue founder.
Sure.
That was his model with JetBlue, and it works. We have customers that are more loyal to us. We've had zero churn. Nobody has left of our 50 plus customers since we started. And so just that attitude that people know they have the CEO's cell number, and so they can call me in the middle of the night, and I know all of our customers by first name basis, and it goes so far. And granted, it takes a lot of my time, which is another reason I quit the fire department, but it has a lot of value with brand awareness and getting that brand recognition. And so that user experience, going back to the bug, there's going to be them, but our customers are still happy.
Yeah, that's great. So you get it together, you get ready to launch. I love the fact that you talked about that customer service piece. I think that's number one in any industry. You either get it or you don't get it. If you're going to have great business, you got to take care of your people. And like you said, it's going to take some time, but it's worth it. It's going to be worth it in the end, because not only will they be a long-standing customer, but then that's where you get your referrals of them sharing it with someone else. Like, hey, check this out, try it out. And then that's how you grow. So you get to your launch. Talk to me about the launch. Once it's ready to go, what was that day like? And when you got it out there into the world?
It was very well received. It was kind of one of those moments where the founder, my co-founder, Sky Thompson, who's in Mill Valley, he was there. We had another buddy that was a firefighter with us there, and my wife, who does our marketing because our background's in media. We're all there at this booth, and it was a New Orleans EMS World Conference in 2019. And so we technically already launched, but that was really, okay, the product's where we like it. We're comfortable taking on more customers. And so the reception we got from everybody was one of those moments where you're like, oh, wow, we might be onto something. And it's something that you don't get as a fire chief is like when you're an entrepreneur, you get these wins, and it might be a small win. Like we closed a deal for $360 like a month ago, but it was still like a nice high for that day. And so those little wins is something that we first felt at that conference in New Orleans in 2019. That was just really inspiring. Like, okay, we're on to something, and this is going to be
okay.
fun.
So I imagine this app is primarily for who? Like paramedics, fire departments. So we're talking about organizations, not individual users.
Individual users at the organization. So somebody can't, like if somebody went to the iTunes store or Google Play Store, they could download it right now. But they're not really going to be able to log in because they don't have an account set up. They just click contact and then they can email go straight to all of us and we get them set up. But it's designed so that an administrator, there's basically two pieces. There's an app and then there's the website, the administrator's website, where the administrator can see everything and anything that's going on in real time. And so as a paramedic might be out in the field administering fentanyl, that's going to pop up on the administrator's website, and they're going to see the geolocation, the actual map, GPS location of where that occurred. And they can see how much of the fentanyl was administered, how much of it was wasted, which paramedic did it, which paramedic verified that they did it, because that's a requirement from the DEA. And that was another big problem with pen and paper is that there's certain actions with narcotics that you have to have another person verified that you did that. And with pen and paper, you can just pencil whip it. And so with our app, we use fingerprint Face ID for that verifier so that they're like, okay, this person actually did verify it at this exact moment, at this exact location. And so there's really those two components. All of the users in the field, they just have the app, and we intentionally made it so all they have are those two buttons. They don't get to see everything else going on because really it's just not necessary. If there's somebody like say a chief officer that works out in the field, like a battalion chief, the administrator for the account can give those individuals authorization to see it, but really it's intended just to be an accountability system for the folks in the field and easy for them. And so we have had, because if the people in the field don't like it, they're going to complain, and then the chief's going to be like, well, what is our other option? They might go with something else.
Sure. And that's why you make it
so you want to make sure everyone
firefighter proof and take care of your customers. So are you able to share like who some of your customers are? Is it, obviously this is something that could go anywhere across the United States, even the world, I would imagine. So who are the people that you have right now? Where are they based?
So that's a good question, because at first we started this as for paramedics, for fire departments, ambulance companies. Well, then about a year ago, we got an inquiry from California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so they said, hey, our rangers and some of our law enforcement folks carry narcotics, and they carry these other euthanizing drugs, some other crazy drugs that we want to keep better accountability on because they're spread throughout the entire state. And so I worked with them for about 6 months to do some customization so that our software would work for their application, because they had a few little things they did different. And now they came on board effective July 1st. I mean, I've been working with them over a year to get it going. But yeah, we have California Fish and Wildlife. The city of Portland just came on for their fire department. We also have other industries besides Fish and Wildlife. Law enforcement, we have an agency in Maryland using it to track their illegal narcotics that they have for training the canines. And so they have a safe where they keep all their heroin and cocaine and crack and all that fun stuff that they keep in a safe, but they have to track it too. And so when they take it out of their safe, they scan it with our app. When they get to like the junkyard where they'll train the dogs, they'll scan it, they'll throw it in the trunk of a car. And that way it geolocates where that cocaine is at the junkyard. So if anything ever gets lost, which is what happened and why they called us in the first place, to show that they were doing something, our software is able to keep complete accountability of that. And so it's really got a ton of different applications, including like dentistry. We have a dentist in Florida trialing it. And so it's not just across the US, but we also have customers in the UK. They were at that first conference in New Orleans, and they invited us out. A big customer there invited us out in September. So we're going to go out there to their big annual conference and see how many more customers we can get.
Well, Clive, I have to imagine, like you say, you're at 50, but it feels like in no time, it's going to be 500. It's going to be 5,000, because this is one of those tools where it seems like it's a necessity and makes sense. If you're doing pen and paper, you've got to make the transition to LogRx, the app, right? That seems to be the logical thing.
It is. And we joke with people that say, hey, pen and paper is like driving without a seatbelt. You're fine until something goes wrong, and then it's too late to change your path. So yeah, the sky is the limit, and our total market, total addressable market is only expanding with these different industries. And just in the last 6 months, our revenue has quadrupled from 2018 or 2019 till the beginning of this year, which is what triggered my decision to kind of hang up my fire chief hat. Is the company was just taking off so much that my wife and I discussed it. And I was like, you know what, we're going to miss the train because of this interest we're getting. And during the pandemic, so many agencies that had been kind of in that sales funnel interested, they said, hey, we got to pause things. We have to worry about keeping our guys healthy. We can't go try out new software. And so we kind of shut down a lot of marketing during the pandemic. And so it's just through this word of mouth that we started getting all these additional customers. And it just started really spreading at a decent rate to where I was like, hey, if I don't quit my fire department job, we're really going to be left behind. Because that's one of the things with startups is there's no idea that you're thinking of that someone else probably hasn't thought of. It's just the execution. And I saw we weren't properly executing this if none of us were going to be doing this full time.
Well, and that was the big thing too. I was thinking, while it looks like the success is happening, it's growing. Another question you have to ask an entrepreneur like yourself is, what were the major hurdles like outside of the development to get it to launch, within launch and to where you are right now to where you're going to go? What have you seen as the challenges? Has it been just kind of along the way where, like you said, things come up and then you kind of redevelop things? Has there been anything outside of that has been a big challenge for you guys?
The biggest challenge has been the development piece. We have one developer. He's got another job. Honestly, developers, a good one, you're going to pay $250,000 if they're in the US. And so he's our chief technology officer. He's on our board of directors. And so he does a lot more work than he charges us for. But that's been kind of the hang up is we have all these different ideas. And as you build it, we get new ideas. Like Portland said, hey, can we take a picture with the phone of the drug box during the daily check? I was like, yeah, it's a great idea. Because a lot of times every agency is going to say, hey, can you do such and such with the app? And like, well, nobody's ever asked for that. And I've been in the industry 20 years. I don't really see other customers asking for that. So we can put that at the bottom of the list, but we can't invest our time and money in something that's not going to be applied to everyone else. But when the idea that Portland gave us sounds like something that would apply to everyone, we're like, yeah, let's do it. And so the development side is like, hey, he's only got so much time. He's got a wife, 2 young kids. And so we can only grab so much of his time to get the development where we want it. So we're bringing on a second developer mid-September.
Nice.
Full time.
Well, the voice you hear is Clive Savacool. We actually have never met. Usually I would say 9 out of the 10 guests that I have on the program, I know them through some source. You were actually recommended to me by a mom who had one of their kids come to my basketball camp. And I think she works in the industry, and I feel bad because her name escapes me right now, but she had mentioned you. So I had reached out and thinking, okay, I don't know a lot about this space, but then I thought, you know what? That's what this program is all about. It's about learning new things. Like, I think you've really given me some insight into what really goes into an app. You think about it, there's millions of apps, and behind those millions of apps are millions of people who had to come up with the ideas. So it's good to know the process.
Yeah. And it's fun. And one of the benefits of us kind of going at the slower pace is we didn't, a lot of challenges startups have that go out and do like fundraising, and they'll go take investor money. They'll say, hey, I got this idea. I could have done that with my idea and go into investors from my old startup and say I got a couple $1 million. I go build this thing, make it all fancy, and then you launch it, and there's, well, this isn't quite right, or this feature it really isn't going to be used. And so investing too much money early on without that interaction with the customers really insulates you, and you don't really know exactly what the best path is. And so because we've kind of gone at a slower pace, because we were all doing other jobs at the time, it's really helped us make the product go at the pace that the customers were able to give us that feedback so we can make it as dialed as it is. So it's been a really fun process.
So as we end segment 1, and because I want to start now talking in the next segment about, being a paramedic, being a fireman, being a fire chief, you've done all those things, you walked away from it for this adventure that you have. Is someone out there that is in these industries that we talked about was interested, in getting the LogRx app or going to the website, what would be that information?
They go to our website, logrx.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't have any other social media, but my wife makes me go do some LinkedIn every day just to get brand awareness out there. But yeah, our website's the best path. And we just relaunched it. We upgraded it. So there's some newer videos on there going through the program. Nice. And then you can also just hit the contact us form, and we'll return your email or call within a half hour or so with a real person. So it's pretty easy to log on and get to know us.
And there is something about being able to talk to the person that is in charge. I do love that part of businesses that do that. So good job on that. I applaud that. We're going to take a break. And when we come back on Experience the Buzz, more with Clive Savacool. He's doing a great job with this app. Before that, though, he has been in fire as a paramedic, a fireman, a fire chief, and actually was up in the Tahoe region for some major fires that took place. He mentioned the Caldor fire that took place in 2021. This guy that we're talking to put together the evacuation plan. And it's quite a story because he put it in place just a couple months before it happened. Amazing thing. So don't go anywhere. We're back with Clive right here after this. All right, so great first segment right there, talking about the LogRx app. Clive Savacool is our guest, and right now it's time to thank our sponsors. Experience the Buzz. It's all about small businesses. It's all about entrepreneurs, and that's who is represented when we talk about our sponsors. First two I'd like to give to you, R5 Stitch and Print and Pit Boss Jerky. I have featured both Troy Rousey of R5 and Joe Green of Pit Boss Jerky in episodes 25 and 26. So if you become a sponsor, part of that is we would love to tell you a story. How did you get to where you want to get? So if you're a local business out there and you'd like to be a part, you can go to buzzardball.com and just click sponsor, and that will show you all the various types of programs that we have. You know, I try to make it easy, very customizable. In fact, speaking of these two sponsors, they have been with me since day one. Okay, R5 Stitch and Print. Worked it out with Troy. We just do trade. It works great. It's awesome. If I need some gear, go to Troy. He takes care of me. Boom, I give him some love on the podcast. Pit Boss Jerky. Well, that one's simple. No money is exchanged, only beef jerky. And if someone loves beef jerky, it is definitely me. So R5 Stitch and Print, you can find that at r5print.com or dial up 916-454-3773. Their specialty is embroidery and high screen printing. They've got amazing machines that will do amazing things for you. They also can create a portfolio that you can check out and see for yourself. I'm a visual person, so I love that. So anytime I have an idea that I go to Troy with, he says, let me put something together for you. I see the visual, and then I know right away, hey, that's something good, or we can improve upon it. They also have a graphic design artist. Maybe you're looking to do a logo. They have someone in-house that can do that for you. Again, that's R5 Stitch and Print. And then Pit Boss Jerky, Joe Green, he's amazing. Here's his number. I'm telling you why. 916-769-6807, because that is how you're going to order the beef jerky. He's got 13 amazing flavors, including one named after this program. It's called Experience the Buzz, and it's very, very good. Raspberry apple chipotle would be a near second for me. You got the very popular Island Teriyaki, and the latest flavor to come out a few months ago is White Bull's Barbecue. I only gave you 4, believe it or not. There are 9 others. So if you love beef jerky and you love tender beef jerky that has great flavor, Pit Boss Jerky is definitely what you want to order. Again, that number is 916-769-6807. All right, let's get right back to it. Segment number 2 with Clive Savacool. We're going to talk to the former firefighter about his job as a firefighter, a fire chief, and a paramedic. And he also rode motorcycles as well. We'll touch on that as we get back to Experience the Buzz.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode of Experience the Buzz by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. It means everything. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back. We are with Clive Savacool. We've been talking about the LogRx app. Very fascinating story. Clive being the man behind it. He's the brain trust. Obviously has people, including developers. Did you realize that? Developer, $250,000. Wow, I can't even wrap my mind around that, but that is good stuff. So what did Clive do before all this? Well, he mentioned being a paramedic, being a fireman, being a fire chief. But even before that, I saw too that You were a motorcycle riding instructor for 12 years. Throw that in the mix.
Oh yeah, that's I'd still be doing it had not had a nasty crash about a year and a half ago.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh man.
And
it's usually that's how it happens, right? It's like you have that one crash and it's like, gotta walk away. I've never rode a motorcycle, but I imagine that was pretty easy to walk away from.
You would think, even after 2 weeks in the hospital, but I still miss it every day. And I have to have all my trophies in the closet so that my wife doesn't see them and get mad at me again. Because every once in a while I'll bring like, hey, I kind of want to get back into it. And like, do you remember how many injuries you had? And so, yeah, I raced for a long time with AFM, which is kind of the feeder into the Pro Series, and just met the most amazing people. And that was my getaway. Like, it's zero stress, go to the track, ride around. I don't have to supervise anybody, get to go blow off steam, get to hang out with my buddies, have a beer at the end of the day. So it was great. It's obviously before I met my wife, but it was really my de-stress, my yoga, my meditation.
I like that.
Yeah.
Heavy metal music's that same thing for me. So I totally get what you're saying, but it seems like you have a good way of being able to kind of close doors when you need to and start new chapters. So take us in between being a paramedic and then a fireman and then rising up to being a fire chief. My curiosity is what is behind that, being a paramedic, being a fireman, and then being a fire chief. Maybe you can take us into that world a little bit.
Yeah, so I kind of fell into a lot of it. I started out in Contra Costa County. This is in the mid-90s. Reserve firefighter. Got my paramedic license at 19. I could administer narcotics before I could drink alcohol. Got a job with the ambulance company, and then got my first job with East Contra Costa Fire, which is now part of Contra Costa Fire. And I just went up through the ranks. I worked at the busiest firehouses just because I really, really enjoyed it. I've got wicked ADHD, so I don't like sitting still. And so the busy firehouses just were that constant excitement that I needed to kind of keep my attention going. And then just through that experience, I promoted up through the ranks as a captain. We had a double line of duty death. And so I kind of joined the union leadership as a vice president to kind of help steer the union in the right direction, to help kind of mend the organization, especially the area I worked in where the two firefighters were killed. And that really kind of got me involved in the administration side of a fire department and the nuts and bolts of how it's running. And so through my role as a vice president, on a whim, I took the battalion chief test because I had never had any intention on being a chief officer. Zero. I liked my station out in San Pablo. I liked being just a captain, like mountain biking before work, and battalion chief just a whole other headache. And so I took the test and just came out number one, not because I'm smart. It's just because, rough seas make good sailors. And so I just worked in busy departments, and through my position in the union, I was very involved. And the administration, the assistant chief, he appreciated all my work that I'd been doing for the organization. So he was happy to promote me. And then through some fires, I had some pretty bad injuries, and I left Contra Costa Fire in 2014. Just 'cause I almost died at a fire in Bay Point, I think it was. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty nasty. And so I got to the hospital at that time. I had a lot of hospital visits in my 44 years of life. And so I left. I started a software company, my first one, to track exposures. This health and safety. And then I kind of missed being in the fire service to some extent. So I took a fire chief job, which is basically a desk job. So I didn't have to be around smoke or anything, at Garden Valley Fire with El Dorado County. I'd worked there for 4 years, still stay in touch with those guys. And then I went to South Lake Tahoe Fire to be their fire chief in 2020 to help them get through the pandemic. Yeah. And the 2 years I was there, it was a whirlwind. I can go through a laundry list of all the accomplishments and everything we did, but you pick any kind of natural disaster, I think we encountered it. So it was quite the 2 years there, and got a lot of experience. But with LogRx's progress, I was like, hey, I think I'm done. It's time. It's kind of like that quote in Indiana Jones where he says, it's not the years, it's the mileage.
That's so true. Yeah, because walking away, like I think in any industry, especially one where you had a big span of time of knowing that moment, I knew what my moment was when I retired from teaching, like what that was specifically that day. What was it like for you? What was that moment that told you, okay, I'm done?
So I'd already talked to my wife. I quit on a Tuesday.
See?
This is how fast it was. On that Saturday, I talked to my wife about possibly leaving, and while we were on a walk around our house in Tahoe, and we were discussing it, and there's some stressful elements of being a fire chief. I want to sugarcoat it. It's not as glamorous as it sounds. You have the rank, you have all the gold all over you with your badges and all the other insignia, and you're important, but it's still a very stressful job, and it's truly lonely at the top. And so I would go home after a long day of work, and it was very long. Like I'd get in really early and I'd leave late, and I'd get home, and there's always be some story. My wife asked me how the day went. I'd explain some challenge I dealt with, and then I would check my LogRx email. And right before I decided to resign, maybe this week prior, there was a day where I had a rough day at work, and I come back, and then an email was from one of the operations managers for an ambulance company in Florida, had moved to another ambulance company. And she said, she emailed and said, hey, I'm now running this other company. I really love your program. How quickly can you get us up and running? And so I have all this stress with one job. I come home, check an email for literally an $8,000 contract with zero effort, like zero touch points when you talk about sales. And it's like, what am I doing? And so talked about leaving that weekend. And then I took Monday off, and then I went to work Tuesday. First thing I get into work, city manager calls me with some dramas going on in the department or the city. And then I called, I had another meeting to go to, and it was a little bit stressful. It was about internal issues, which I don't want to air any dirty laundry in public.
Yeah,
but
sure.
It was some challenging issues internally. And so I text the person I was going to go meet with. I said, never mind. I can't meet today. I turned my car around, went back to my office. City manager called, asked me to do something. I said, no, I think I'm going to pack my office up. Stuck my head out in my office, asked my secretary, hey, how much vacation do I have? And she goes, oh, you have 7 weeks. So I told the city manager, all right, my last day is May 8th or something. And he knew what I was dealing with. So I wasn't just doing a mic drop and bailing on him. He knew very well some of the challenges dealing with. So, and he knew about LogRx. I was upfront with that before they even offered me a job. And so I said, look, I got to move on. I'm missing the boat with my other company. And I've done my job here. I got them through a pandemic. I vaccinated 20% of the community, got them through Calder fire, the snowstorm. I mean, during the snowstorm, the fire chief and the police chief, we were driving to Nevada to pick up doctors and nurses, driving lights and sirens through the town because it was just dead stop to get them to the hospital because we couldn't have staff. And so there's so many stories I could tell you about how the staff at South Lake Tahoe, we just killed it for 2 years. And so I feel like, hey, I'm going to say I don't feel bad about leaving early, but I've definitely done what you hired me to do. And so I'm going to move on. And I knew that they wouldn't be able to replace me in the 7 weeks. So I had appointed an interim or suggested an interim. The city manager appointed him. And I said, but this is my last day. And so I took a load home, had my secretary in my work car. She was just kind of eyes wide open the whole time. Like, what's going on? I was like, hey, I gotta call it. And so she dropped me off my house. She took my car home. I went to my next meeting, which I had with the Forest Service and Cal Fire, which I had coordinated, so I couldn't bail on it.
Yeah.
And I'm in like a plaid shirt with jeans and cowboy boots. And I was like, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to quit, I think. Like, no, not really. I said, yeah, I think I'm done. And so
what was that first day like? Like you said you had some vacation, but what was that first official day like? Like after you knew the dust had settled, I'm a free man, I'm going to dedicate my life to this LogRx app, or at least for this portion of your life. That had to be a good feel. Was it a sense of relief?
Yeah. Sorry, I think that was your original question. I went off on a long story, but
that's okay.
It was very, very, very liberating. And I didn't realize it because it was when I was driving the car when I first turned around that the thought was, man, I should just quit today. And then as soon as that thought went through my head, like, yep, that's what I'm doing. And so, and my wife called, she was down in Sacramento. She called that night and asked how my day was. I quit, but I said, I'm just done. And I don't know if it's my ADHD, but I've had insomnia my whole life. Plus being a firefighter doesn't help. And that night, I swear I slept so good. There was nothing weighing on my mind. It was just, sunny beaches ahead of me in my mind.
I love it.
So it was, to your question, it was extremely liberating, which there still has been some struggles since of, wow, that was the end of, all that work I did. Cause I like to think I was good at it. And I did have a job offer that first week, that I quit from another department. I paused for a second to look at my wife, cause I told her, who was on the phone, and I said, no, I can't do it. I'm done.
Yeah. And that was just someone recognizing that you are good at what you do. So you can kind of take that with the grain of salt, okay, wow. Okay. So I know I could do this anywhere, but it is time to move on. And I had mentioned the 2021 Caldor fire. That was one I remembered, 24,000 residents. That was August of 2021. You got the Angora fire from 2007. The evacuation plan, I thought that was a pretty interesting story. That was part of something big that you did. You talked about the vaccinations, but tell us about that evacuation plan. That was very timely on your part.
Yeah, I've actually got like a 2-hour class I put together because all these different agencies have asked me to go through how those events played out. And so I took several months to prepare an evacuation plan starting in the spring of last year. And basically the city prior to this evacuation plan had a map with a bunch of arrows based off where you lived. It had an arrow. So it might be sending you towards the fire, and not to dog on the previous person that built the old evacuation plan. Like, okay, we have technology. There's better ways we could do this. And so I basically took the city with the city's GIS coordinator. I want to give him most of the credit. Broke the city down into neighborhoods, and then basically identified them for which direction the fire is coming. This is how we will evacuate those areas. And it isn't always necessarily whoever's closest to the fire, because you might have an area closer in away from the fire, but it might be higher density or impoverished demographic that doesn't have cars, or elderly. And so maybe they're going to evacuate early. So like Barton, we had a whole separate evacuation plan for Barton Hospital. And so a whole lot went into it. And then once I built it, this is something I learned years ago, is you need to go share it with everyone else and get them to sign off on it so that they feel like they have a hand in its creation. So I went to CAL FIRE, CHP, Forest Service, the neighboring fire agencies, our police department, the police chief of South Lake Tahoe, he's a rock star, and the city manager. So everyone, we got together, and that way it was branded and adopted by everyone, and El Dorado County, which is another great group. The sheriff's department there is amazing. And so basically we had this universally adopted evacuation plan, took it to city council on August 3rd, and then we evacuated it August 30th of last year. And so in the 2 weeks leading up to the evacuation, we were in the EOC, Emergency Operations Center, which was at City Hall until the evacuation. And we were just working the entire time. I could tell you countless stories of everything we did to get it. Like, you'd be surprised. We have an airport. The city council chambers was at South Lake Tahoe Airport. It is. And I said, let's get some aircraft up here because the smoke's gonna be so thick. Because during the Tamarack fire, we couldn't get some aircraft in. And they're like, well, there's a contract with the airport where anybody that uses the airport has to use the airport's fuel, and the Forest Service wants to use their own. No. I said, get our city attorney in here. And within an hour, we had a new contract drawn up so the Forest Service could bring their helicopter in. So there were so many different things we did to make sure that the evacuation went smooth. And so we evacuated tens of thousands of people in, I think it was 4.5 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty awesome. I mean, my thought going through my head is, have you thought in your mind, and I know this is still early, but at some point, if you were missing the, firefighting business, right, that you would say, hey, I'd be a good consultant to be able to put together, I don't know, evacuation plans or something of the sort. It feels like you've had your hand in so many kind of behind the scenes things that are so important that none of us would ever think of.
Yeah, I've talked to other agencies, went down to Marin, gave them a little, actually, no, it was virtual for Marin, but I basically offered it up, not as a consultant, but just kind of for free, saying, hey, if anybody wants some help, I've done this. I learned some lessons. I put together a very thorough presentation, even some areas where I said, hey, I messed up in this one area. But I've never wanted to do the consulting thing. And this, just because kind of sitting back, and seeing my industry. All of us fire chiefs, we think we're all very important, beautiful, unique snowflakes. And all of us have the idea that when we retire, we're going to go charge someone $1,000 an hour to give our opinion. And so I just never wanted to be that guy.
Okay. That makes sense.
I like sharing my experiences simply just to help.
That's cool.
So when people have asked, I've said absolutely. But yeah, it's one of those things where I'd never evacuated the city before. And so I learned a ton. And fortunately it went very well, and we learned a lot, and we had a great team. I can't emphasize that enough. I was one cog in that wheel. But yeah, it was quite the experience.
That's cool. Well, Clive, I have to ask, since I have a former firefighter here, you see the movies, you see the TV shows, everything. One of my favorite shows growing up, Emergency. I loved Emergency. That was a paramedic show, a really good one. But, taking us into that world, whether you're fighting a house fire, maybe it's a rescue, or even a forest fire, which obviously is a lot of the case, especially in the area that you're in. What are some things that you could share with us that people would not know? Like when you're in the thick of it, you said you almost lost your life, which I imagine, I don't know what the number is for firefighters and how many times they might lose their life, but I don't think we understand the risk that is taken each time you go into a situation.
Yeah, it's a good question. And being a firefighter it's kind of, I relate it to when I was racing motorcycles. And when you're racing a motorcycle, it's not necessarily an adrenaline rush. It's a sport. And you never realize some of the tracks around here, like Laguna Seca, you go over turn one, they're 142 miles an hour. You don't think about how fast you're going until something goes wrong. And it's the same thing with being a firefighter. When you're inside a house fire, I couldn't tell you how many I've been in, you get to understand the feeling. You feel like, okay, this is the amount of heat I should feel right now. When I open the nozzle, this is the amount of heat I should feel. If I'm not feeling that, or I'm getting too much steam blowback, it means I need more ventilation. And so there's a lot of different feelings you get. And then every once in a while, if something goes wrong, and I when I was a captain, I remember pulling my firefighter out of this apartment fire. He's like, something's wrong. I said, there's something not right. And it ended up, what was happening was we were pushing the fire, and it was going around a corner through the kitchen and coming up behind us. But there was something in my brain saying something isn't right based off what I'm feeling. And so that's kind of how firefighting is. It's nothing like this you see on TV. You can't see anything inside, despite what they say. And you also don't go in without a mask, or you're dead within the first few steps. Gotcha. So all that glorified stuff they show on TV is very, very inaccurate. And I guess the other piece is one of the challenges that I had to face early on is because I worked at all those busy firehouses. It takes its toll, and I'm used to being an athletic guy doing sports and pushing through, especially with all the broken bones I've had with motorcycles. But it got to a point to where I was having some like serious lung damage and some other issues that eventually, okay, I should probably take the battalion chief promotion simply because my body's not keeping up. And if I want to have any quality of life when I retire, I need to slow it down. Sure. So that's probably the biggest thing that I could push on or let people know about the firefighting industry is it's not quite how it looks on TV, which is probably not a surprise.
Exactly. But I'm glad you said it. It feels good just to hear it from someone who's been in the trenches. Forest fires, though, too. What's the difference with those? Is that same kind of feeling that you're talked about? I imagine just the magnitude of something like that. I think in my brain, when you think of like those forest fires, you're like, man, it starts so small, but it can get big so quick. And how does that happen? And what are the elements that really take place that make something so, magnificently large?
Yeah. And the forest fires they're not as intense, usually not as intense, unless something's gone wrong. They are so much about assessing the scene. And you do the same thing when you go to a house fire. You look at it, okay, where's the fire? Where's it going to go if I don't do anything? What's the building construction? Which windows are open? Which are closed? If I attack from this side, where's it going to go? Forest fires, you're looking at the topography. Where's the slope going on this hillside? What kind of vegetation is it? What does it face? North, west, east, south? Because facing south is probably lighter fuels and it's going to burn quicker. And then there's certain times a day that if it's in this area during a time of day, you're at a greater chance of having more flammable fuels because the fuel moisture is lower. So there's a whole bunch that goes into forest fires with just assessing the situation. And I don't want to pretend like I'm the best expert on that. I worked in North Richmond where it was foggy most of the year when I was at Contra Costa, but that's where the humility came in as a fire chief during the Caldor fire. Is I just called the operations branch, who was Cal Fire chief officer, one of the smartest guys in the planet when it comes to fuel modeling, assessing where the fire is going to go. And so I'd call him probably more times than he wanted, just because as hounding him, because I would report back to the emergency operations center, say, here's where the fire's going. But that's where recognizing where your strengths are at and then relying on others, such as Cal Fire and the Forest Service, because they were really the ones that were addressing the operations of the Caldor fire.
And Clive, the biggest depiction for me when I think of a firefighter and bravery and strength has to be 9/11. Like just those scenes from there of seeing first responders, both firefighters and policemen, rushing into these blazing buildings, knowing in my mind, we didn't realize that they would fall down like they did, but just realizing that there was no hesitation on going into those buildings. And maybe you can speak to that, because to me, I had to admit, my dad was military. I didn't want to go into military. I don't know if because I was scared, but it also made me respect and honor those that did decide to go into military. And I feel the same way with people like yourself, who are firefighters, who are policemen, who on a daily basis put yourself in very risky situations. And so I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah. And that reminds me of kind of what I was trying to train the firefighters in Tahoe about with leadership in regards to organizational loyalty. And that's something the assistant chief that promoted me to battalion chief years ago taught me when I was an engineer. When I was an engineer, the driver of the fire truck, I actually got passed over for captain. My first shot, I was really young. I took the test young and I did well on the test, very well, but I didn't have a good interview. So they passed me over. And when you get passed over in a big department, all your peers, it's embarrassing. And I felt bad, but I showed up to work. I didn't let anybody know I was affected by it. The guy they passed me over for, I went to his badge pinning, gave him a big hug, told him congratulations. And years later, the assistant chief told me that the reason he promoted me to battalion chief was because of that organizational loyalty I had. He saw that I got knocked down and I didn't let it faze me. I got right back up. And so what he taught me was that, it's not about me. It's not about, me wanting a raise. It's not me getting a better station, better shift. It's what is the mission of the organization. And we all have to recognize that our needs come after that, because we signed up to serve the agency. The patch on the shoulder says, Contra Costa Fire. It doesn't say my fire department. And so that was huge. And partly because he was saying, hey, the way you behaved, I appreciate. And therefore, I want to put you in a leadership position. And so after that, I really wasn't going to let him down. And so that's what I really wanted to kind of impart to my guys up at Tahoe is, we're struggling at times, but we have to recognize why we're here. And I think to the 9/11 question is they had that culture. They had that sense of organizational loyalty. And sometimes okay, if I don't do it, no one else is going to do it. So we have to go and take care of business.
I love that. Well described. Well, Clive, this has been a great conversation. I had all those questions in my mind, and man, just the answers really just makes me feel better. Just even gives me a deeper respect for the position, gives me a deeper respect for someone like yourself who was willing to, step aside from something that you'd done for a long time, but you recognize too that it was time to move on to the next chapter in your life. And I think that's the beauty of an entrepreneur, is being able to make those decisions. Sometimes they're hard, but looks like risk reward is going to be good for you. And I see nothing but good things with this app, LogRx.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I just want to say thanks for having me. And I didn't really get to mention it, but the city of Sacramento has been absolutely amazing place. I relocated here from Tahoe. They've got a great startup community. There's great networking, and then people like yourself. It's just such a great community. I'm really glad I did end up here to make LogRx our home.
Okay, so you are in Sacramento.
We are now, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, see, now that really gives this show clout because it is about Sacramento people. That was the whole thing. It was I was like, okay, well, he's not really from Sacramento, but you know what? I'm interested in the app and then obviously being a firefighter. So you know what? You just solidified everything with that comment.
Oh, yeah. You're not just some guy. I wanted to come on your show for a reason.
Well, I love it. I love it. And obviously continued success to you, and really appreciate the time.
Likewise.
All right, we're going to take another break. And when we come back, we got a special segment. It's the debut of Heavy Metal Thunder. That's right. Details to come right around the corner. Well, big thank you to Clive Savacool. Very good stuff. And at the end, yes, we find out he's from Sacramento. So like I told him, that just put the bow on the present for a great conversation. And yeah, he's from the 916, or at least lives in the 916 now. So let's get to our sponsors. We want to thank two others that have come on board and has been with us for, wow, it's close to a year now. Little Whale Swim School has been with us for a long time. Anya Hall, I talked to her and give you her story in episode number 6. And Little Whale Swim School is looking to expand. Right now, they have a main summertime swimming facility at 4106 El Camino Avenue in Sacramento, and they're all year long. I know summer's wrapping up, but they offer classes all year long. That facility is great because it is indoors, which means you have a nice heated pool. And like they like to say, their motto is, it's always summer at Little Whale. So again, you go to littlewhaleswim.com, or you can call them at 916-790-5945. Get into lessons for your kids or even adults. They've got adult classes as well. In addition to Little Whale Swim School, we also want to thank Matt, the mortgage guy, Matt Gougé, who was featured right here on Experience the Buzz, told his story in episode 28. Website, mtmg.com. Phone number, 916-802-9291. Matt's pretty amazing because in addition to helping people like myself and Kristen, he got us through a refinance couple months ago. I would say from start to finish took about a month. Okay. In addition, he also helped us lower our insurance rates on our home and flood significantly. So I'm very grateful to Matt and his team. And he has also teamed up nationally with U Mortgage. Why? Well, I think it's because of his presence on YouTube. That's right. He's been doing it for a long time now. He has over 1 million viewers, over 500 episodes, and he simply educates on the things I'm talking about: loans, buying homes, selling homes, you name it. He's done it. Okay. He's talked about everything under the sun. You can check him out live too. He does a live show every Monday at 6:00. And if that was enough, he's just added a podcast. That's right. He's got one. He's joined the ranks. It's called Get Better Every Day. He's doing a great job just getting out of the gates with that. And of course, on to bigger and better things. So that is good stuff. And we're very thankful to our sponsors. Again, if you'd like to be a sponsor, we would love to get you on board. We've had as many as 6 on the show. So there is room for everyone. Again, just go to buzzardball.com, click sponsor. You'll see the packages there. But again, as I explained in the first segment, I can do trade, beef jerky for life. In this case of Matt the Mortgage Guy and Little Whale Swim School, they are with one of the packages that you will see on the website. So let's make it work for you. Let's highlight your small business and get your name out there for others to see. Okay, so Clive Savacool in the books. We got one more segment. Here it is, the debut of Heavy Metal Thunder.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode of Experience the Buzz by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. It means everything. Now, back to the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Experience the Buzz. We got a brand new segment. It's one I've been thinking about, and now it's coming to fruition. Rock on. Yes, it's called Heavy Metal Thunder. What are we going to do in Heavy Metal Thunder? Well, it's going to be a quick opportunity to kind of highlight some of my favorite albums from the metal years, whether it be present or back in the day. And so to kick off our opening, our first one, I have to go to the first heavy metal album that I ever bought and was actually dared to buy back in 8th grade at St. John Vianney in Rancho Cordova, because I was a guy who liked pop, and I had a couple of guys who were kind of, hassling me, and they claimed to be big rock legends. Turned out they liked bands like Rush and Yes, and those are okay, but they dared me to listen to Iron Maiden. Now, what's interesting about this is that the album is called Number of the Beast. Now, I was at a Catholic school, okay? I went to a Catholic church, and here you have, as you see the album art cover, You got Eddie, who is the main guy for Iron Maiden, has been throughout the years. In fact, I can tell you a little fun fact. Derek Riggs is the artist. So he is the guy that brought Eddie to life. They would bring him on stage during their live shows, and he's kind of dangling his puppet strings over the devil, Satan, right? And then Satan's dangling his puppet strings over a little Eddie. You can't quite see that, but there's a little Eddie in there too. So I was fascinated by the art, but I am here to tell you, I'm not a Satanist. No, and neither is Iron Maiden. See, that was the big thing at the time when this album came out. Everyone thought these guys are Satanists. They're promoting Satan. It's the absolute non-truth. In fact, take it from the bassist Steve Harris, who said, quote, this was about a dream that was inspired by a movie. And in fact, Michael Kenobi, my producer, might know this movie. It's the 1978 film Damien, Omen 2. So it was inspired by that from a dream. And so Steve Harris brought it to life. And so thus we have Number of the Beast. Now, what I love about this album is that there are 3 tracks that really, I believe, are the all-time best tracks of Iron Maiden. There's some others along the way, but I'm going to give them to you in order. In fact, I'll go from 3 to 1. Number 3, Hallowed Be Thy Name, which is the final track. There are only 8 songs on Number of the Beast. And then we go Run to the Hills. You cannot beat Run to the Hills and that little drum set going. Listen, I am not a musician, but I know good drums when I see them. And in fact, that was the last album for Clive Burr because Nico McBrain took over from there. Now, these are words and thoughts for any heavy metal enthusiasts out there. If you don't know anything about heavy metal, this is all going to go over your head. So I'm really speaking to the people that would say, yeah, I know what you're talking about, Steve. And that's why I love heavy metal. But the number 1 song has to be the title track, Number of the Beast. Now, if you bought albums back in the day, not only was hearing the great songs important, but it was the order of the songs. And what I love about this is that you kick off with a song called Invaders, followed up by Children of the Dam. The Prisoner comes next, which, by the way, is kind of my dark horse song. If I were to have a number 4, The Prisoner would be in there. And then you've got a song called 22 Acacia Avenue. It's about prostitution, okay, whatever. And then you get Number of the Beast. And what's cool about that is you get that opening, woe to you, O earth and sea. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is eerie. And it sounds very Vincent Price-esque. I've got another fun fact for you. It is not the voice of Vincent Price. It is actually an English actor named Barry Clinton. That's right. They actually, Iron Maiden did offer to Vincent Price to do this part in the song. It's just a spoken part from the book of Revelation before it gets into the nice guitar riff and the drum beat and everything. Oh man, so good. But Vincent Price asked a big price. In fact, he asked for about $35,000, and Iron Maiden said, I think we can find someone else. So they found an actor named Barry Clinton. Pretty cool there. And this track is just beautiful. So Number of the Beast, Run to the Hills, Hallowed Be Thy Name. The other song in there is Gangland. So I loved albums that didn't go any more than 10 songs deep. You can't give me too much, right? Don't give me too much. 8 was perfect. So 1984 was the year, 8th grade year at St. John Vianney. And wow, Iron Maiden definitely made an impact on me. Great way to start out. I would then graduate to other albums, which we will talk about in future episodes. And I should tell you that that's all I've got on Number of the Beast, released in 1982. I encourage you to go on either Spotify, Apple Music. If you're a heavy metal thunder advocate, a metalhead, go through and just do what we did in the old days. Take it and just listen to the album 1 through 8. Don't hit shuffle. See, shuffle messes everything up. No need to do that. You got to listen 1 to 8, Invaders, Children of the Dam, The Prisoner, 22 Acacia Avenue, Number of the Beast, Run to the Hills, Gangland, and then Hallowed Be Thy Name. Okay, check out my 3 top tracks for sure. Again, the dark horse would be The Prisoner. Good stuff. Now, my rating, based on all of my albums, I love albums that are good from beginning to end. So I'm going to put this one at an 8.2. 8.2 is the delivery I am giving to Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast, and that is Heavy Metal Thunder. We'll be back with a final thought. There you have it. Another exciting episode 95 in the books. A little special flavor with Heavy Metal Thunder. Hope you enjoyed that review on Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast. And of course, a big thank you to our guest, Clive Savacool. He is the director, or I should say, the originator, the creator of the LogRx app, which he discussed in the show. So we only have 5 episodes left before we get to number 100. We're going to keep this train rolling right down the track. So excited to see who's going to come on board for episode 96. That's all I got for now. Talk to you next time. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for joining Steve this week on Experience the Buzz. Steve would love to hear from you. Leave a review or contact Steve directly with any questions at scbuzzard@gmail.com. To see the other adventures of Steve Buzzard, be sure to visit buzzardball.com.
I didn't mention it in the show because it wasn't really pertaining to anything, but you brought up heavy metal, and I was talking about motorcycle racing. And a lot of times people would ask me, like, there's a video online when I raced the Pikes Peak Hill Climb years ago, which is just a crazy race. Like, if you crash, you're dead, literally. And so people say, well, what was going through your head? And I was like, Thunderstruck from AC/DC.
There we go.